Hello, hello. I'm not going to pause the recording because I might forget to resume it. Now, maybe I'll pause. So, first thing about this week that's different is that the M3 workbook is a skeleton, a place for you to put your work, but it doesn't have all of the questions in it like the previous 2 weeks. So, you can't just look at the workbook and know exactly what to do. So, for instance, here's part one where you open up and you got Q1, Q2, Q3. Well, what is Q1, Q2, Q3? That's all coming out of the directions. When you're on a single screen, it's useful to be able to switch back and forth without using your mouse. So I think it's worth saying that there is a shortcut for you to say, oh, here I am on the Word document. I want to switch over to the Excel document. And I did that without moving my mouse. So you see my mouse here in the center of the screen. And if I switch, I do that with my keyboard. For Windows, that's Alt Tab. I hold down Alt and then I just tap Tab one time. And for Mac users, that's Command Tab. So you hold down Command and then you tap Tab. And that switches you between, that just goes back to the previous application. So I can keep going back and forth. So that's the first thing, is that you have to use this now as part of what you're doing. Whereas before it was just kind of this document that was like, hey, download this and get started. But now it really actually has a bunch of stuff that's important. Starting with PMT, PV, and FV, which are what I call the big three financial formulas in Excel. And it's got example, or it's got, what these formulas are, what it's used for, and then it's got some examples. So the work doesn't actually start until here. Module 3 work plan. Elizabeth plans to purchase a car. Before I jump into that, hi Kalpana, hi Susanna. Any questions or things for me that people want to bring up? Because I want to make sure you can ask questions. Oh, hi, Stephania. I did get your module 2 stuff graded, but obviously questions about that should be individual, not recorded questions. But public questions, questions about how the class works, questions about, I don't know, anything. Hi, Roberta. All right, well, let's jump in. So I've got my directions open. I know how to use this, so I'm not going to go through the examples. The question is that Elizabeth plans to purchase a car. So one strategy, if you don't want to switch back and forth, is I could just copy the question from Word and bring it over into Excel sort of temporarily so that I have all the information there and then I'm not sort of going back and forth to figure it out. Of course, you could just write down the information too on paper and then transfer it over. However, it works best for you. So the three formulas, PMT, PV, and FV, and I have made videos about this in the past. So if you look at my YouTube channel, you'll see videos comparing these three. But basically, this is not an easy question to answer. I'm going to buy a car, or Elizabeth is going to buy a car, and she knows what the price is. She knows what the term is, which is how long it's going to last, and she knows what the interest rate is. But the problem is, it's kind of this crazy situation where we get charged interest and then we make a payment. So the amount of the loan goes up and down. This is compound interest. It's implicit, but if we're talking about a bank, one of the things in module 2 for question 4 was, hey, compare simple interest and compound interest, and what's the difference? And the difference is compound interest will make the lender more money. So of course, banks are going to use compound interest. So this is a compound interest question. We're making payments. We got interest adding in. It's pretty complicated. So it's, I wouldn't say miraculous, but it's nice that Excel has this equation. And in fact, in some ways, this really marks a distinction between this course now and this course 5 years ago. Because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I was teaching this algebraically, where we would look at the equation and you can see the equation in Newton, and it's pretty crazy. And you got to plug all the numbers in, and then, maybe you got to rearrange something if you want to solve it differently. Okay, so how it works, start with the equals, of course, because we're doing a computation, and the formula is PMT, those three letters, and then open parentheses. So we've done the only formula we've really done up to now, aside from sort of writing our own multiplication, addition, subtraction, has been the sum formula. And the sum formula, we write equals sum, and then we highlight what we want to add up, and it adds it up for us. This one's a little different. There's three things that I need to give it in order to get it to give me the answer. The first thing is the rate. And by the way, you can see here underneath the formula, it's telling me a little bit of a hint about what's happening. So the first part is the rate. What's the rate in this situation?
7.25.
Okay. That it? 7.25? All right, moving on. Comma. And then the n per is the number of periods. And the number of periods in this situation, if we're paying it monthly and we got a 5-year loan, how many different payments am I going to make?
Before you go forward, don't you have to add the percentage sign in order for it to be better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be a big problem if we didn't put the percentage sign, because 7.25 is not the same as 7.25%. So 5 years, how many months is that?
60 months.
60 months, right. And it's okay to write 5 times 12. You don't have to write 60. If you know it's 60 months, that's fine. If you don't know what it is, you can just write the multiplication. Excel will do it for you. All right. And then the last thing is not as clear as rate or n per. N per is not really that clear, but once I break it down, you can kind of understand what the letters mean. PV is a kind of a complicated concept. Present value. Basically, I want to know what the price of the car is right now. So what is the price of the car?
$32.50, 500.
Right. And important here, do not put the comma in to that formula because it'll mess up how it reads it. But I'm ready now to look at the answer. There's a couple of things that are wrong. We're going to fix that. But we got something coming out here on the other end. If I don't give it 3 pieces of information, it will grouch at me and say, you didn't give me enough information, not enough arguments. So the first thing is that this shouldn't be negative. And the way to fix that is to make this last value negative, because it's like I'm borrowing the money. This is a consistent theme across the 3 formulas, PMT, PV, and FV, all have that third value as a negative. So $2,392. I always like to push people to ask, like, does this make sense? Does this seem like a reasonable answer? I know that's hard when you're sort of struggling and you're in the woods and you're like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But what do you think? You probably
I think that's a lot of money.
It
If
is.
that's gonna be monthly, yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Price of the car.
It's a lot of money. It's only a $32,000 car. I mean, that's a lot of money too, but we're talking 60 months. So just a quick back of the envelope, 60 times 2,000 or 2,400, if I round it to the nearest $100, we're talking like $144,000 being paid over 60 months. That's crazy. That's not right. No way that's right. And the reason is there's a mistake here that we haven't addressed, which is that this rate, 7.25%, that's an annual rate. It's not stated in the problem. It's implicit. When we talk about rates in the banking industry, we're not talking periodic rates. We're talking annual rates. So how do I make this into a monthly rate? You did this a lot in module 2, where it was like, okay, take this rate and how much is it per day? How much is it per month?
Do we divide that by 12?
Very good, Kapana. So we're dividing by 12 because we're taking something annual and we're splitting it into smaller portions, which is a monthly rate. At this point, this should come out correct. That's still a lot of money for a car note, but it's more reasonable in terms of what the expectation is. If I'm going to purchase a $32,000 car for a 5-year loan at 7.25%, it's going to cost me about $650 a month to do that. All right, so that's the PMT formula. And this is a big one. I would acknowledge that out there on the internet, you can just ask like mortgage calculator, car payment calculator, and you can give it the 3 numbers and it'll give you the answer. So it's not like you have to use Excel to do this magical thing, but we're going to use this a bunch as we go forward and finish this financial section. All right, let's look at the second question. And of course, if anybody has questions, just shout them out. I'm going to copy this, bring it over, and I'm going to delete that, so clutter things up. All right, I'm going to buy a car, same situation. Interest rate, I got a 4-year loan this time, 3.9%. I got a better rate, and I want to pay around $300 a month. What value of a car can I afford? So one thing, it says use the PV formula. One thing that I like to call the PV formula is the responsible borrowing formula. And I don't know if you've ever been to a car sales lot, but what happens is you start walking around and then they try to get you to fall in love with the car. And then they try to convince you that you can afford to buy that car at whatever price they have. Maybe they'll give you a little bit discount. That's not really the right way to buy a car, in my opinion. I've done that before. And I ended up overpaying for the car because salespeople are very good at what they do. The responsible borrowing formula starts from a different perspective, which is how much can I afford to pay per month? I'm looking at my budget and I'm saying, all right, I can afford a $300 car payment. Now let me go figure out mathematically how much could I afford to borrow? And I need the other two numbers. How long am I going to do it for? And what's my interest rate? So let's see how it works. Equals PV. And you can see again popping up underneath it, rate N per PMT. So the first two things are the same. The third thing is the payment, not the amount of the loan. We're just kind of switching the order of those things. So what's the rate in this situation?
3.9%.
Percent. Good. Moving on to the next thing.
I have divided by 12.
Yes, exactly. Because we want to take that annual rate, turn it into a monthly rate. It applies here too. All right. N per 4 years. How many periods? How many months?
4 times 12.
4 times 12. Right. And I can write 48. I can write 4 times 12. Both of them will work fine. And finally, what's the payment that I'm talking about?
Minus 300.
Exactly. Minus 300. It's great, Roberta. Now, if this happens to you, keep in mind that this just means I don't have enough space to show you the answer. So I got to go up between B and C. I got to make it a little bit bigger. So $13,000 is about what I'm looking for to borrow the car. I'm going to leave Q3 for you to do because it's basically Q2, but with a few numbers that have changed. So it'll give you a chance to practice the PV formula. And again, I think it's good at the end of that process to ask yourself, does it make sense? Right. So if I borrowed like a longer period of time and I paid a bigger monthly payment, should I expect to be able to borrow more money or less money?
Mhm.
Like if I did this one, but I just said, oh, I'll do it for 6 years. Am I going to be able to borrow more money or less money?
Okay.
Any guesses?
More.
Oh,
More. Yeah. The reason you do a longer term loan is so that you can afford to borrow more money. Banks all over that. They love that. And then if I raise my payment and I pay more, am I going to be able to borrow more money?
hmm.
Yeah. If I pay more per month, I should expect to be able to borrow more money because I've got more borrowing power by paying extra every month. And so that should frame your expectation about the answer you're going to get here because you're doing a longer year loan and you're doing more on your monthly payment. So you should expect to get more money here. All
Mm.
right. Let's talk about the fourth part, which is the third equation, FV. Now, to start this out, you're going to answer the question of when you want to retire. So you're picking a number for your age here, for the age you want to retire at. I love teaching. I'm going to go till I'm 75 years old. All right. I'm going to be the old guy, like, oh, no, you can't make me retire. I'm going to keep teaching. Don't put 75. If I see 75, I know you're copying me. Nobody wants to retire when they're 75. It's crazy. All right. So then I want to see you do a little bit of math to get the months until retirement. And I don't mind using any of the other cells to do the work to get there, right? And so let me give you an example here. We'll do I got an 18-year-old in the class and they say they want to retire at 30. 18 years old, wants to retire at 30. So in order to figure out how many months this person has until they retire, what would we need to do? How would we solve that problem?
Is it 30 minus 18? How many more years to go?
Good. That's the sub question, right? We talked about that in module one. In order to figure out how many months, we need to figure out how many years we have. Then we can figure out how many months. So the sub question is how many years? 30 minus 12 would get me 18. And then here I'm ready to calculate how many months that is. Sorry, 30 minus 18, not 30 minus 12. Got ahead of me. So how would I figure out how many months it is? If I'm 18 years old, I'm going to retire at 30. How many months do I have? What's the math, not the answer?
Is it 12 times 12?
Yeah, I want to take 12 times 12. And one of the things I want to push you towards, and I mentioned this in the feedback on module 2, use cell references, right? So if I've done the subtraction to figure out how many years I've got, I'm going to use that cell reference to plug it in to do 12. This is the number of months in the year, and this J6 is how many years I've got to go. And I unfortunately picked 12, so it's 12 and 12, which, well, whatever. Once I get this orange box filled in, you'll see that this number, this fills in as well. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this so you can see what's going on here. This is pretty crazy. We've got FV, but we got a bunch of cell references, right? That's what C10 and G6 and B11 are. In addition to being cell references, they're a special kind of cell reference which fixes part of or all of the cell reference. You don't need to do anything in this formula. I wanted to show you a little table and give you some practice using autofill. You don't need to write the formula. You need to do autofill once you've got the orange part set up, and then it should be able to fill it in for you. So remember, when we do autofill, we click on the cell, not double click, because double click puts us inside the cell like we're going to edit it, right? Double click puts us inside, whereas, oh no, escape. Single click just selects the cell. So we selected the cell, bottom right corner, the cursor changes, and then I can click and drag to the right. I can click and drag down, and then I can finish filling out this table. There were a couple of people on the second question in module 2 that did the very painful thing of typing all of the work out. That's not the point of the table. The table is in the beauty and the power of Excel is in this autofill action. So if you're confused about that and you're like, this feels like a lot of typing, then you should stop and you should seek support because that's not the way we're intending to do that. By the way, all of those numbers are going to be different because they're going to depend on your months until retirement. Nobody should be doing 144 months until retirement. Well, maybe, I don't know. Okay. Any questions about this first part? There is a box here to practice writing. I want to keep giving you opportunities to do writing in the workbook so I can look at your writing and give you feedback. Some of you did a really beautiful job in the questions on part 3 in module 2. Some of you were very terse, like short sentences. There's nothing wrong with short sentences, but you want to make sure you're actually answering all of the parts of it.
I get a question.
Sure, Stephanie.
As I'm going back to my Google
Yeah.
sheets, how mine doesn't have the first one that you got, like the very first square that you click. Yes, I don't have that yet. Like, and I already clicked on it, and nothing's showing. Just not even a formula either. Like, I don't have that.
Are you in C11?
Uh, C11.
Yeah.
Yes, and nothing's coming up on mine.
Okay. Well, this is what it looks like, and the code should be exactly the same. You need the dollar signs, you need the commas and everything. Let me zoom in a little bit so it makes it a little easier. And then when you get the recording here, you can come back and you can
Okay.
make sure you got that. But basically, you've got C10, which is the interest rate. We're dividing it by 12. So that's the same thing we did last time. We've got G6, that's N per. And if you scroll up, you'll see that's highlighting this box here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got B11, which is how much are we putting away every month. So the FV formula, very similar to PMT and PV, starts with the rate. Then we do N per, and then the last part is the monthly deposit.
Okay, so I
If a
can click
dollar,
that formula in there, right? If
yeah,
I put
if it
that in,
doesn't
it
show
will.
up, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's
uh,
some translation from Excel to Google Sheets, but if it doesn't show up, that's what you would need. Then you can autofill from there.
okay. Okay, sounds good.
And the dollar signs work the same in Google Sheets they do in Excel.
Mm.
Susanna, question.
I'm sorry, I chimed in a little late. Can you show me how you're getting to the actual word questions?
Yep. So all of this is in the M3 directions, and this is a distinction between module 1 and 2, where it was all self-contained in the workbook. And if you ignored the directions, it really didn't hurt you because the directions just said, download the workbook and work in it. But now there's a lot of instructions, steps, examples, information in the directions. And so that is an important thing. And one of the things I said at the beginning, and I'll say it again, being able to switch back and forth. If you're not a multi-screen person, then you want to be able to switch back and forth easily. It is not the same to look at these in a kind of a half and half setup. What happens is, especially in Excel, it can be frustrating because you lose. So I see a lot of students doing something like this to be able to kind of see the instructions and then see the thing. But you do lose some stuff here with Excel when you do that. So I prefer to have them both be kind of full screen, but I use the Alt Tab trick in order to switch between the applications. So if I need to get the information instead of having to use my mouse, I'm switching back and forth using Alt Tab. I'm in Excel. Now I'm back at the direction. Okay. So I'm going to press on to credit cards. Just last point about these three formulas. These will show up at different places in the course. They show up in the milestones and the projects. So put a pin in it. These are useful things. We're going to use the PMT formula later when we get to the mortgage question, the larger loan question. That's a really, really powerful formula. We're gonna lean on that. Okay. So we did a little credit card exercise in module 2. It was based on a statement, and we looked at some things, and now we're going to start looking at using Excel and autofill in order to construct payoff scenarios. The first 3 scenarios, we're not going to go all the way to paying it off. In the 4th scenario, your challenge is to look at the situation, use some problem solving in Excel to help you solve what is kind of a difficult problem. So we'll do I'll do scenario 1 and kind of show you how to set up scenario 2, and then I'll kind of set up scenario 4 so you can think about how you would approach that problem. The prelude is you've got a debt of $250, you've got an interest rate of 13.99% APR, and you want to know what the finance charge is for a month. So finance charge is a technical term for credit cards. It just means interest. Another way to think of it is it's the fee, right? Because we talked about how interest is just a fee. So this is the fee you're getting charged for having borrowed money from the credit card company. And we're skipping over grace periods and all that. We're just going right to like, we owe this much money. We don't have any more grace periods. So any ideas about how I would do this interest calculation?
Well,
Shannon, get your hand up.
I do. I was actually asking about, I wanted to make sure I understood the scenario. So the scenarios are coming from the online, the document, because I
Yep.
was reading through that today and I was getting lost a little bit.
Yep.
And
Scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. I'll zoom in a little bit. Yep.
okay, okay. I think I was reading it in the wrong order. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. You need both of these things for sure.
Okay.
So how are we going to find the interest charged? We got this $250 debt. We got an interest rate of 13.99%. How do we put those together to get the fee, the interest, the finance charge?
So I started with the payment. I don't know. No?
No, we're not ready for the payment. We just want to know we owe this much
Oh,
money. We got this interest rate.
Wouldn't we start with dividing the interest rate up over 12 months?
Nice. Because the 13.99% is an annual rate. We want it to be monthly. So this is important. We got to take the 13.99% and divide it into 12 parts. And at that point, it's really just a percent of question. We know what we owe. We know the percent that we're being charged for the month. And so we just do a percent of calculation. So this times 250 will give me what I'm being charged. Now, this comes out with a lot of decimals. I should use my formatting tools up here to make this money because I'm not, all of those other decimals don't end up mattering in terms of what I'm being charged. So that's just the prelude. Now we're going to do it. But when we do it here, we're going to use a cell reference because in order to build this table properly, we need to use cell references. That's the key to making this work. So everything in that formula, 13.99% divided by 12, notice that there's nowhere on the sheet that I can grab the number to use it. And this number is on the sheet. And I do want to use the cell to reference it. So I'm multiplying by 250, but I'm doing it through a cell reference. We talked about it last week, but again, this is very powerful because it allows me to autofill. And just to show you an advanced vision of what's going to happen, this cell, when I autofill it, that's not B6 anymore. It's B7 because I'm multiplying by the cell on my left. That's what is happening when I do autofill. Excel is thinking kind of like, oh, if we were doing this, now we're going to multiply by that. Exactly what we want it to do.
Could
Okay.
could you show the autofill thing again? I was one of the students last week who was
Yeah.
sweating and manually had to put all that in there. I'm not super
Yeah.
familiar with Excel.
Right. So autofill, you select the cell, you go to the bottom right corner and your cursor changes. That's really important because there's various symbols, and I don't know if you can see the way that my cursor looks, but right now it's a
Yes.
fat plus sign. Right now it's a plus sign or a cross with arrows on the end of it. And when I go to the corner, it's a thin black plus sign. That's what I want. And even if you're in Google Sheets, I think the corner is a circle, not a square. But when you go to the corner, it changes to a little cross. And I want to pull down, and that's my autofill happening. Now, this is not very exciting because I don't have anything to multiply against. So I'm going to hold off and kind of do this in one big swoop here. But that's how you autofill.
Thank you.
If we go back to the purchases, it says I'm paying my cell phone bill of $89 a month. So I'm going to put this in. I'm just going to say equals 89. And part of that is because if I don't say equals 89, there's a chance when I autofill that it'll think 89, 90, 91, 92. Excel tries to do some pattern predicting. That's not helpful. I need this to be 89 every month. That's my cell phone bill. So I just say equals 89. All right. Back to doing some math. New balance. Where's my new balance going to come from? I know I owe $250. I got a fee, $2.91, and I made a purchase of $89.
the sum of those three.
Nice. Now, like I use sum, I'm going to take your lead, Roberta, and use sum to do it. You could do it just saying plus. You could say B6 plus C6 plus D6. I don't mind. Either way is fine. This is kind of on the edge of where sum is useful. It's only 3 things to type out, so it's not that hard. But hey, sum works too. Sum says add up these numbers. And that's what's happening. So my new balance is now $341.91. If we go back to the directions, it says scenario 1, 15% of your new balance. So there's more math to do here. How am I going to find my minimum payment? $15% of your new balance. That's scenario 1.
Would you multiply E6 by 15?
Very nice. Oh, yeah. But 15%.
Point, yeah.
Just don't
Oh,
forget the
so it's
percent symbol.
0.15. Okay.
Well, either way, 0.15, 0.15, or just say 15%. Excel knows what to do with the percent sign. But don't do 15 because multiplying by 15 is a really big payment. That doesn't make any sense. I hope you would look at that and say, that doesn't make sense. Okay. 15% is about $50. Now I'm ready to do my last calculation. And when I do this, this is already set up to bring this number down to the next row. We're ready to autofill. So we're almost done with this table, believe it or not. Because you're like, oh, we barely got started. We're almost done with the first row, but we got all these other rows to do. Autofill is going to save our lives. All right. How much is left if I had a balance of $341 and I made a payment? What is happening mathematically? Operation.
You're subtracting it from the balance.
Nice, Liz. And just make sure you're using the new balance, not the starting balance, because otherwise we're skipping over the purchase and the finance charge. You see how the 290.63 is now populated down here? So we're ready to do autofill magic. All right, this is going to blow your minds. I'm going to select the whole thing, and I'm going to autofill down. Done. This scenario is finished. Do it again. I've selected across. Sometimes students struggle with selecting. They start autofilling here. If you autofill here, you're going to really mess this up because now I've basically told Excel, take this formula and put it across. That's not what I meant to do. Control Z, save your life. Select. So I'm just highlighting and then I let go. I'm not holding the mouse now. Now I go to the bottom right corner and I click and I drag and it's autofilling. So there's some things I can do to kind of track and see like, okay, this is making sense. I've done this right. The purchases are staying the same. Why is the finance charge going up?
The amount of the purchases are going up higher, the balance rather.
Yeah, the balance. The purchases are staying the same, but my balance keeps going up. So yeah, I'm going to keep paying higher fees because my balance keeps going up. So that's important to recognize here that we made payments, regular payments, and the payments are getting larger too. But I'm not making progress on my debt. I'm actually going backwards. That's not good. From here, yeah, go ahead.
So I did start this and I'm redoing it with you. But I've come up with a very slightly different answer for the last box. I came up with 409.82.
So when that happens, you've got to track through the table and find where there's a divergence because there shouldn't be any difference between my answer and your answer.
Right.
It could be that you typed in something. And
yeah, you're right. You're right.
And
I see
it's
it.
not
I see it
adjusting
now.
properly. So
I see it now.
that's one of the things you can do as you're looking at the recording. You can say, okay, this is what it should look like. Now, where has it gone different? So I'm going to kind of zoom through these scenarios. Take your time, try to work through the scenarios. Whether you want to build the first line on your own or not is really kind of a matter of preference and like do I want to practice this? It's just kind of a nice thing to practice because if you have any debt, this is a way of building yourself a little payoff table to look at the situation and analyze it. I'm going to be a little lazy. I'm going to copy this top row. What happened? Copy, and then I'm going to go here and I'm going to paste. I use the keyboard shortcuts to do that. Control C, copy, Control V, paste. On a Mac, Command C, Command V. In scenario 2, what changes is I'm paying 50% of my balance. Much more aggressive. So in scenario 2, I need to pay 50%. So what changes on this line here? Does the finance charge change?
No?
No. Purchases? No. New balance? No. Payment. I'm not
Question.
paying
Why wouldn't the purchases change if that was from scenario 1?
because all it says in the directions here is this part has not changed. This applies to all the scenarios. All that's changed is my minimum payment.
Gotcha.
And that's actually through all the scenarios, that's the same. So that's why copying and pasting is a useful strategy because a lot of this is not changing. So what does need to change here?
Is it 50%?
Needs to be 50%. I'm paying 50%, not 15%. Okay, that's made a big difference. And I'm going to go ahead and autofill, and you'll be able to go back later and kind of look and make sure the numbers match. Again, got to have the formulas to make the autofill work, and do not do the tedious work of trying to get these numbers to match without using autofill. That's not the way you should be doing it. Question: did this approach, did I make progress on my debt?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was making big enough payments to be able to make progress and lower my debt, which is good. I always think it's interesting that I always make myself the central character. This is somebody else. But anyways, I like to put myself in the shoes. All right. Last situation, sometimes people get confused about this. It says minimum payment is 75. Typically what happens is people overthink this. What is the minimum payment?
$75.
That's it. That's it. 75. Now, let me show you this, not putting the equal sign. Let's see if it does the thing I was talking about. Yeah, you see how it tried to count up? That's not what I wanted. So that's why it's good to put equals 75. So when I autofill, it knows, hey, stay at 75. So the only other thing I would say about scenario 1, 2, and 3 is make sure you highlight this final cell because this is the answer to the question. And when we're using a table to answer a question, it kind of brings up an important point like, well, I got a lot of math going on here. I got a lot of numbers. What is the answer to the question? So this is an easy way with Excel to say, hey, this is what I intend to answer the question with, because it is kind of a one number answer. What is the remaining balance after 5 months of payments? And don't
I have
get
a question for
confused.
you.
Yeah.
I still haven't used like the spreadsheet they're using right now because I'm just following through what you were doing.
Sure.
But and how would the difference vary? Like once you do the I'm losing my words here. When you do the autofill, like how would it change? I think Shannon was saying that like how would it change your answer?
Well,
I'm just second guessing myself now because it's like how would it
our
do it if
answers,
autofilling
they
that?
should be the same. Everybody's answers are going to be the same.
Right.
And so the thing I don't want to see is when I go and I click on this cell, I don't want to see 291.
Gotcha.
And that's where you start to have problems because then if you're trying to autofill from that, you're not going to have
Yeah,
a
since it's not a
successful.
formula. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Gotcha.
And
Okay,
I
thank
don't
you.
think I don't think, I mean, I saw things kind of change, but the final answer is still 95.35. So I don't know. I think you can still kind of get to the same place. But again, there's going to be no process behind it, which makes it kind of meaningless for you, especially if you're going to go back and look at it and say, how did I do this? Okay. So to set up the last question, and I'm not going to work through it, but I will kind of give you some guidance about how to think about it. I am going to now do this for 12 payments, and I want to pay off the debt. So the goal is to get this to zero. Now, what I know about $75 is I'm going the wrong direction. So what does that mean that I need to do? Pay more or pay less?
More.
Pay more. Absolutely. Now let's find the magical line where things go up versus things go down, because there is a specific point here that we can figure out where if we pay more than that, we'll be making progress. And if we pay less than that, then we're actually not going to be making progress. We're going to be going backwards. Anybody have any guesses? Like, what is that magical number that divides this scenario into two different results?
Maybe 220?
$220?
Yes, I think.
Well, 220 it would get this done very fast. That's more than enough. It's way more than enough. You'll see, I'll go negative in 2 months. I'll be done. And the goal is to get this number to zero, but only as you're making the same payment that you're getting down to zero in this last one. So this is a little bit of a problem solving and experimenting to kind of see how things happen. 220 is way more than I need. The answer comes from looking at what is added on. So if we think about the finance charge, go ahead and round it to the nearest dollar for me. How much are we talking?
$3.
About $3. And the purchase is $89. So what is that together?
92.
92. $92 approximately is the magical line between making progress and not making progress. So let me show you what I mean. If I only do $91 and I autofill from here, I will be going backwards. My debt is going up. This now is 261. I started at 250. This is wrong. I'm going the wrong way. If I do equals 92, then I will be moving in the right direction. Very, very slowly, but I'm moving in the right direction. So again, your challenge is to pick a number here, and there's a couple of right answers, so there's not like one unique answer that is going to get me to a place where this will get to zero. And you can change the final payment, but you want to make it smaller, not bigger. So I wouldn't want to do this approach, because if I wanted to get this to zero the last time, I'd have to go 340.91, and I'm violating the rule that I want to make my last payment smaller than all the other payments. So that's
So
a little bit of a puzzle.
that last payment has to be a problem as well.
You can just type the last number in to make it hit zero.
Okay.
But you want to make it smaller than the other numbers, the other payments. Sorry. All right. If you get stuck on that, circle back. We could share. I mean, usually if I sit with somebody for 3 or 4 minutes, we can start to kind of move you in the right direction. You can figure out what the situation is. But I can't give you more guidance, because then I'll be answering it for you. All right. Let's talk larger loans, mortgages and larger loans. I'm going to switch back over here. And so there's a couple typos here, because we used to be focusing on home payments, and I decided I wanted to focus more on student loans, because that's often the first kind of big debt that college students get themselves into. Although some of you will be able to get through this experience with no debt, which is amazing. So the setup is $80,000 of student loans. You don't really need to pay attention to this, but this is real. You get a little bit of a break after you graduate to be able to get yourself in order before you have to start making payments. You get an 8.1% interest rate. That's fairly realistic. And then you're going to try to pay it off in 20 years. And so with those three pieces of information, we can start, and it's already filled in here for you. The principal is 80,000. The interest rate is 8.1%. Number of years is 20. Let's do that PMT formula. Equals PMT. What's the first thing?
Oh, shoot.
The percentage rate?
Percentage, yeah, 8.1%.
Wouldn't it be divided by 12 again?
Got it. Yep, perfect. How many years? Let's go back to the Word document.
20 years
20
times
years.
12
Very good.
months,
Very good.
right?
Okay. And then the final thing is the amount of debt.
80,000.
Yep. And again, put a negative, don't put a comma. And you got yourself your payment. Everybody's going to have the same payment on this first one. But you want to have the work there to show where that number came from. Don't just fake it. Okay, so the interest, new balance, and the payment. This is very similar to the credit card table, but we're taking out the purchases because when we're paying off a big debt, we're not adding more to it every month. We're just making payments. So the interest is the finance charge. We take the 80,000, we multiply it by 8.1%, and we divide it by 12. Where does the new balance come from?
It's going to be the sum of the balance and the interest.
Just put them together, right? I'll do it with addition this time instead of using the sum formula. I'm just putting the balance together with the interest. That's my new balance. All right. And now I'm going to bring in my payment. Here I'm going to reference this cell over here. This cell has actually been named. And for some of you, if it says J6 instead of payment, here's how you would do it. So I could say J6. But it's important that I make this a fixed cell reference. So I'm going to put the $ here and here. You may not need to do that. If you just reference that cell and it says payment, then that's going to work just fine. That's a special feature in Excel where you can actually name cells, things, and then reference them using that name. All right, I'm almost ready to do my payoff table. I think there is a left column here with the months, but I'm already set up to the first 4 months. I can't do autofill from here because that first number, 80,000, was just written in. So there's no formula there. I need a formula here before I can start doing autofill. So how do I find the new balance if the next month's starting balance? I had a balance of 80,540 and I made a payment.
So
Just subtract the payment.
Yeah, subtract. Take this, subtract out the payment, boom. And I got a balance. Now I'm going to start autofilling. The first thing, I'm going to do this kind of in pieces. The first one, I just did those 3 to get it all even across. Now I can autofill from here down to 4. Again, the biggest mistake people make is they try to include this and then you keep getting back to 80,000. 80,000 should only appear one time in this table at the very top. From there, it is decreasing. Everything is actually decreasing except the payment, which we hold constant because we're always paying this amount. By the way, this is what's called an amortization table where you take a debt and you add interest but make payments and you get it paid off in a certain amount of time. Okay, but that's not done. We want to do the whole thing. And this is like really Excel flexing its muscles because how many months are we talking about here?
it goes down to
240?
240 months. My goodness. If you're doing this on Google Sheets, you want to highlight 3 and 4. If you're doing it on Excel, it doesn't matter. And then I can start doing autofill to run the table out. So I just did 20 rows. It took me half a second. I'm going to go down to 240. Notice that the row number and this is not exactly the same. So you just got to keep going until the month hits 240. Boom. I'll do one more month just to show you. Yep, we hit 0. I don't need the last payment. It worked out perfectly. The last payment, $674.14, the same as all the other payments. And I hit my 0 balance. So that's the first part. A lot of people find these questions hard. So let me try to frame the point here. We want to analyze a little bit what's going on with this loan. We built a payoff table. So what? What does it tell us? One of the things that's very, very important to understand about this type of loan structure is that how much you reduce the principal, how much you're actually making progress on your loan is very different at the beginning and the end of the process. So just to, without doing any math, to go back up to the top, notice that when I made that first payment, here I'm sitting at $79,865. I barely made a dent on my balance. This is like $79,900. Like I made $100 of progress. What the heck? I had a $600 payment. I had almost a $700 payment. This is by design. It's the way amortization works. It works very nicely for banks at the beginning of the loan. At the end of the loan, it flips, and then you're paying almost all of the money is going to pay off your debt. But you got to make it there. So you'll notice that a couple of things have been brought over already into this little section here. And I'm going to redesign this section next time I do this. But so this answers some of the questions. I think the first question is, how much of the first payment is interest? And that answer is already here. It's $540. When I pay $674, 540 of it is going to pay the interest. So what does that mean is left to pay down the principal, to pay down my balance? The keywords there are what's left. What operation is what's left? When I ask a what's left question. There were 10 cookies and Giselle took 2. What's left? What operation am I asking you to do?
Subtraction.
Yep. So starting with the payment, you can just use E2. I'm going to take off the interest. And this is what's left. That's how much progress in dollars I made on my balance. Even though I paid $674, $134 is how much progress I made, how much I paid off on the principal. And I think it's useful to look at that as a percentage, to think about, okay, what is that out of my total payment? So remember, to make a percentage, we do a ratio. We look at the part, which is, this is annoying. When I zoom in too far, it'll do that. Equals G5, here's a cell reference, out of my payment. So that's about 20%. Only 20% of my payment is going to actually make progress in paying down my debt, which means 80% of my payment is going into the bank's pocket. Again, it's not them cheating. That's by design how amortization works. And that's the same in any type of loan, car loan, home loan, student loan. At the beginning, the vast majority of your money is going to pay interest. Okay. In question 3, then we're going to kind of look at what happens at the end of it. The first, there's like a spot missing here, but it's because the first question is kind of silly. How much is your last payment? Well, my last payment is the same as my first payment. So my last payment, I'm just going to put it here, but it's $674.14. So the interest from in the last payment is just $452. And I can repeat the process here to see how much money is going in terms of dollars, how much is going to principal, and then what percentage of my payment is that. As we look at the last couple of questions here, and we're almost out of time, which is fine because I think we're pretty much there. First of all, this number is brought over for you. It's the answer to this question. Which is the first month that your starting balance is less than half the mortgage? So if you look at this, it has a cell reference in it, A166. Let's look at A166. Here it is. So what's special about this month is that's the moment when the balance goes below half. We started at 80,000. Half of 80,000 is 40,000. This is the month where we finally are starting below halfway. And the follow-up question you can answer in the Excel doc. You're not doing any work, you're not putting any answers in here. Don't submit the Word document. Is that halfway through the loan? Yes or no? Is 165 months halfway through the loan process?
No.
No, not even close. 120 months would be halfway through. We're already at 165 months. We're years past halfway. Okay. Total repayment, total interest. I want to show you a couple of ways to do it because.
I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So if I were answering this question without being in this, I would have chosen 30, the one right after that instead of the 40, because I would have been looking at probably being over technical about the 40,000 part.
No, that's right.
So I would
We
have
don't
gone
want
to
this number.
39,000.
That's right. We want this number. This is the moment when we went under.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So how much did I pay total? And a lot of times students get kind of overwhelmed by this question, like, oh gosh, I don't know, a lot of money. But think about a simpler, similar question, right? If I pay $10 a month for 6 months, how much did I pay? What's the math that we're asking there?
It would be total principal plus all the interest payments for all 240 months, right?
That I have to think more carefully about what you said, but let's answer this question here. This is a simpler, similar question. This is not the question we're trying to answer, but it's framing what do we need to do to get to the answer. If I pay $10 a month for 6 months, how much should I pay total?
You multiply.
Yeah, just multiply 6 times 10. So that's the concept here, because what we did is we paid the same thing over and over and over again. How many times did we pay that?
Right. So
240.
So
240
so
times. Well, there you go.
Yeah. Okay.
So take the payment, any of these payments, and multiply by 240, and you'll get the total repayment. Now, I think what you're saying is exactly right, Shannon, that we could have started with the balance and added all the interest, and that would have got us there. But that's a more direct way to think about it. If the payment is the same every time, that works fine.
That makes sense. That's an easier way to do it. Yeah.
Another option is to add up all the payments. And we do have a tool with Excel to do that. So I want to show you that with the interest, because there's no easy way. The interest is always changing. Total interest, there's a couple ways I could think about that. I could use subtraction to figure it out, but I want to show you the sum approach. Because if I just add up all of these charges, then I'll find the total interest. And a very cool trick here for the total interest is to click on the first cell you need, and then if I do Control Shift down, it'll go all the way to the end. Then I can press enter, and I've got my sum of my interest. That's option one. Notice that if I just do the repayment minus the principal, that would get me to the same place. So there's always more than one way to solve a problem. It's not important that you do it one way or the other. It's important that it makes sense to you what you're doing. So I do have to run off, but as you shift over here, what you're going to do is you're going to do this table one more time, but you're going to change the payment and you're going to make the payment bigger. So if you look at the instructions, it says you need to go at least $25 more. So if our original payment was $674, what's an example of an acceptable higher payment? Needs to be at least $25 more. 700. Perfect. So, and you could do 710, you could do 705, you could do 750. The point here is to get you thinking about how being more aggressive can save you money. If you owe the money already, you don't have a lot of choices. But the one choice you do have is I could pay more money every month and I could save myself a little bit of money. So that's what we're going to do here. Build a new table. It's going to have all the same things, interest, new balance, but the payment you're going to just type in. So if you're doing 700 equals 700. And then you're going to autofill, build it out. This time you won't need to go to 240 months. So just keep an eye on it as you're autofilling, keep letting go and kind of evaluating. Do I need to go farther? Have I gone past it? Once you go negative, you've gone too far. And then there's some follow-up questions here for you to kind of think about, problem solve. All right.
I have one last question.
Sure,
This
Susanna.
is all due by Friday or by Sunday? Because I was a little confused on what the deadline is. Friday or Sunday?
There's a soft deadline and a hard deadline.
Okay. So is
The
either one
soft
acceptable?
deadline is